December 2024. Olga Lucia Peñuela, a resident of a suburb of Bogotá and mother to a 13-year-old daughter, meets a man who seemed perfect, trustworthy, handy around the house, attentive and caring. They move in together, and at first their relationship unfolds smoothly. But over time, his care turns into control, demanding total submission. When Olga decides to end the relationship, the man reacts calmly, at first. A few days later, the threats begin. Olga blocks his numbers and avoids going out alone. But even these precautions don't save her. One day, he lies in wait, intent on showing who's in charge, and stabs her multiple times. Her daughter says the man's name was Diego. She heard him yelling, "Without me, you're nothing." This is a story of a murder that could and should have been prevented. Investigators quickly identified the man living with Olga. He introduced himself to her as Diego Murillo, but his identity proved suspect. His real name is Diego Murillo Ramirez. He had a prior conviction for killing a woman. In the case file, the investigator wrote, "The suspect, apparently experienced in violence, repeated what he had already been convicted for. In the archives there is a record. In 2015 he was sentenced to 18 years, but he was released early on parole for good behavior. Under the law he was required to check in with a supervisor, but for a year and a half he failed to do so. No one noticed the violation of his supervision conditions. At the hearing, the probation officer said, 'I did not have time to monitor everyone.' That's how the killer ended up free, without oversight or restrictions. Neighbors remember that Diego worked at the market, was friendly, and sometimes helped older folks. No one suspected that living among them was someone who had already committed a murder. A journalist covering Olga Peñuela's killing looks for similar cases. Among old publications, she finds a note from May 2015. Young mother, found murdered in Bogotá. Suspect, her partner, Diego Murillo. The name matches. She digs through dusty archive files, yellowed photographs, copies of records, clippings with headlines about domestic tragedy. In them is the story of a woman named Tatiana Andrea Calderon, murdered in her own bed. At the time, the press reported that the killer turned himself in and claimed he acted in self-defense. The journalist calls the father of the deceased, Gustavo Calderon. His voice is hoarse, weary. "I warned them. He would kill again." But to them it was just a file in the archive. His words become her starting point. Before her lies a trail stretching nearly 10 years back, to the man who once got a second chance. Now she knows. If it is confirmed to be the same Diego Murillo, this is a repeat murder that the system allowed. Tatiana Andrea Calderon's story begins in Bogotá. She was a young woman living with her mother Olga and grandmother Leonilda. After her parents' divorce, Tatiana remained in their care and helped around the house from an early age. When she became a mother, before she was even legally an adult, life forced her to grow up fast, working, raising a child, and supporting her family. She found a job at a small local shop and brought home whatever money she could, rarely complaining. Her life was modest, but steady. The one thing she longed for was someone to share the weight she carried. That changed in the spring of 2014. One evening, Tatiana went out with a friend to a bar on the south side of the city. There she met a man who immediately caught her eye. His name was Diego Murillo. He spoke softly, listened intently, never interrupted. He told her he was a craftsman who traveled across the country, selling handmade toys and jewelry. Tatiana, used to coldness and indifference, saw in him something different, a calmness, a quiet confidence. Their relationship moved quickly. Within weeks, Diego was visiting her home and meeting her family. Her mother and grandmother welcomed him warmly, impressed by his politeness, his work ethic, and his willingness to lend a hand around the house. He had a way of winning people over. Even Tatiana's young son grew attached to him. A couple of months later, Diego suggested they move in together. Money was tight, so he moved into her grandmother's home. Everything seemed to fit. He fixed furniture, brought home groceries, and talked about plans for the future. Then he proposed a new idea, traveling to fairs to sell their goods. He claimed they could make more money that way. Tatiana agreed, and a new chapter began. They traveled from town to town, selling toys, trinkets, and fabrics. For her, it felt like an adventure. For the first time, she felt free and believed she was building a life with someone. But behind that peaceful facade, something was off. Diego rarely spoke about his past. He avoided any talk of relatives or old friends. Sometimes he grew distant, even irritable, for no clear reason. Tatiana tried not to dwell on it. She chalked it up to stress or exhaustion. Diego always had an explanation. Just a rough day, or too much on my plate. As she saw a partner, he was slowly taking over every corner of her life. First he asked her to cut back on social media. Then he started discouraging her from spending time with friends. What seemed like care began morphing into control, but Tatiana didn't see it that way. She believed love meant compromise, that with patience, everything would fall into place. It was a story that, at first, looked like a rescue, but in truth it was the beginning of a slow descent. In the beginning, Diego appeared attentive, supportive, promising her a peaceful life. Tatiana believed she had found someone who would protect her. He would listen, offer advice, and say he couldn't live without her. But over time, he began to tighten his grip. He didn't want her going out alone. He demanded to know her every move. First came jealousy toward co-workers, then friends, and eventually, even her father. Calls with Gustavo became rare, and whenever he called, Diego was always nearby. Tatiana's replies grew short, cautious, as if she were being watched. Tatiana's friend Elizabeth noticed the change. She stopped laughing. She avoided meetups. And when Elizabeth asked what was going on, Tatiana would just say Diego was stressed or worried. Every concern was met with a defense, like she was already prepared to explain away his behavior. Little by little, Diego cut her off from everything. He made her delete old photos, pushed her to shut down her social media. Every text, every message from someone else became a reason for suspicion. He claimed it was all for love, to build trust. Her father, Gustavo, could tell something was wrong, but Tatiana would shut down any conversation that came close. More than once he noticed bruises on her arms. Tatiana brushed them off as accidents, clumsy falls, nothing serious. Her mother and grandmother thought the couple was just having normal arguments, not realizing something far more dangerous was taking root in that home. By the summer of 2015, Tatiana could barely leave the house without his permission. Diego tracked her schedule, checked her phone, read her messages. Every time she pushed back, even just a little, it ended in an outburst. She was terrified to even make eye contact. Her friend sent her a message. "You've disappeared. Are you okay?" The reply came back short. "Yeah, just busy." After that, nothing. No more replies. The cage Diego built had no bars, only fear, shame, and dependence. And in that silence, where people had grown used to not getting involved, it was only a matter of time before something tragic happened. The journalist's investigation into Diego Murillo Ramirez revealed a full profile, starting from his youth. He was born in a suburb of Bogotá, into a working-class family. His father drove a truck, his mother worked retail. The home was tense, filled with constant arguments. After his parents split, that environment shaped him deeply. By the time he reached school age, patterns had started to form. He challenged authority, clashed with teachers, and lashed out whenever criticized. He rarely faced consequences, always finding a way to shift blame. After high school, he never stuck with a job for long. He made ends meet selling trinkets and toys at fairs and pop-up markets. Co-workers described him as charming and confident, someone who could win people over in seconds. But behind the charm was something colder, calculated self-interest. He used his appeal to get what he wanted, and often the women in his life were drawn into that game offering him shelter, money, or emotional support. This pattern extended to his romantic relationships. He moved fast, winning women over with promises of stability and care. But once he had their trust, he made the rules. Any disagreement was treated as betrayal. His bursts of anger were followed by dramatic apologies. For his partners, it felt like emotional whiplash. For him, it was about control. Psychological evaluations later conducted by experts pointed to a disturbing blend of narcissistic and sociopathic tendencies. He felt no guilt. He ignored boundaries. Relationships to him were a game, and only he got to decide the rules. Empathy was absent. Regret was replaced with frustration. Frustration that he was losing his grip. Neighbors from the different towns where he had lived all described Diego the same way. Charming, but withdrawn. He avoided talking about his personal life or past, preferring instead to brag about his supposed achievements. He often said things like, "People just don't understand me," or "I always end up paying for other people's mistakes." It was a pattern, a way to paint himself as the victim, even while destroying the lives of others. According to investigators, the first reports of violence against women appeared long before Tatiana's death. Old police records mention complaints from former partners, threats, humiliation, physical assaults. Each case was dismissed for lack of evidence. The women, hoping he would change, refused to testify. No correctional program ever altered his behavior. Every time he was released, he simply changed his surroundings, but not his pattern. He would appear, charm, gain trust, isolate his partner, and then destroy whatever he couldn't control. Murillo's story doesn't read like a crime of passion. It shows a system. His actions weren't impulsive. They followed a clear, repeated script. For him, every woman was another attempt to prove that power was the only kind of love he could understand. On May 14th, 2015, Tatiana stopped answering her phone. Her mother and grandmother called early that morning, but her line was disconnected. At first, they weren't too alarmed. Maybe she was busy at work or taking care of her child. But as the evening came, and there were still no calls or messages, worry set in. Her grandmother, Leonilda, decided to go check on her. The front door was locked from the inside. Neighbors said they hadn't seen Tatiana for several days, and that the man living with her had left the day before. Concerned, the homeowner unlocked the door with a spare key. Inside, the air was still, and there was a faint metallic smell. In the bedroom, under a blanket, they found Tatiana's body. The room showed signs of a struggle, overturned furniture, broken items, and stains on the floor and walls. Law enforcement arrived within minutes. Their inspection revealed multiple stab wounds, along with signs of strangulation and blunt trauma. Forensics determined that she had died 2 to 3 days before being found. There were no signs of self-defense, no scratches, no foreign DNA under her nails, only her own blood. The attack had been sudden, giving her no chance to react. Diego had vanished. He wasn't at home, and his workplace reported he hadn't shown up. His phone was off. Some of his belongings missing. Eventually, investigators tracked him to Chicorel, where his parents lived. When the police finally caught up to him, Diego turned himself in, claiming he didn't mean to kill her. He said they had argued, that Tatiana came at him with a knife, and that he had to defend himself. Investigators quickly disproved that version. The crime scene showed no evidence of a two-sided fight. The direction of the stab wounds indicated deliberate, repeated strikes from above. Forensic experts confirmed Tatiana had been pinned down by the neck before being strangled and stabbed several times. Diego was soon charged with intentional homicide, but at the time, Colombian law didn't have a separate classification for femicide, so the case was prosecuted as aggravated murder. In court, Diego pled guilty and requested a fast-track trial. That decision reduced his sentence. Prosecutors asked for 40 years. The judge gave him 18. The court took into account his confession and what was described as remorse For Tatiana's family, the sentence was a devastating blow. Her father, Gustavo Calderon, said the punishment didn't match the brutality of the crime. He filed an appeal, but the sentence remained unchanged. Diego was sent to a central district prison. 6 years later, prison officials submitted a request for his early release. In December 2021, he walked free. No ankle monitor, no supervision, no restrictions. Just a new chance at life. And so the first case, the one that could have stopped him for good, became only the beginning of another story. The decision to release Diego Murillo Ramirez was based on standard protocol. Participation in a work program, no disciplinary violations, and a formal admission of guilt. No psychological evaluation was done. No one checked whether he had changed. He was issued temporary identification, instructed to check in monthly with a parole officer, and given the address of the probation office. At first, Diego showed up for his check-ins. He was polite, kept things vague. Working, everything's fine, he'd say. But after a while, he stopped showing up altogether. The violations were noted, but the case was never taken to court. The probation office was overwhelmed, understaffed, and buried in similar cases. And just like that, the system lost track of him. Diego didn't use his freedom to start over. He used it to pick up where he left off. He changed cities, moved to Bogotá, and found work at a small repair shop that sold handmade goods. That's where he met Olga Lucia Peñuela, a woman in her early 40s, recently divorced, raising a 13-year-old daughter. He introduced himself as someone who had made mistakes, but was trying to make things right. He framed his past as a misunderstanding, claiming his ex had attacked him, and that he only acted in self-defense. He spoke calmly, confidently, with a touch of regret. Olga believed him. She was drawn to his composure, his kindness, the way he helped around the house. He never raised his voice, showed interest in her daughter, and treated her with respect. After a string of disappointing relationships, Diego seemed like a man she could finally trust. Within weeks, they were dating. A couple of months later, he started staying over. At first, he was everything she'd hoped for. He bought groceries, helped with chores, and talked about building a future. He told her he wanted to live right and build a real family. But slowly, the familiar pattern began to emerge. He started asking where she'd been, who she saw, why she was texting her ex-husband about their child. Every answer triggered more questions, more suspicion. His tone shifted, soft one moment, accusatory the next. Sometimes he'd go silent for a whole day, then act like nothing happened. Under that cycle of tension and calm, Olga began to lose her sense of control. She stopped meeting with friends. She stayed home more. Her messages were almost exclusively to him. A few months into their relationship, Diego suggested moving in permanently. He framed it as an act of care. "It'll be easier this way," he said. "You won't be alone." Olga agreed, unaware that she was giving up the last bit of personal freedom she had left. Once he moved in, the control escalated. He monitored her phone calls, demanded explanations, even interfered with how she parented her daughter. Neighbors noticed that things had changed. The house was quieter. Olga stopped greeting people, looked tired all the time. Only her mother, Gloria Inés Boyacá, spoke openly about her concerns. She didn't trust the new man in Olga's life and told her daughter exactly that. But Olga dismissed it. "He's not like the others," she'd say. Meanwhile, Diego once again slipped through the cracks of the system. On paper, he was listed as temporarily unavailable by his parole officer. No follow-up request was made. No one checked where he was living or who he was with. What was supposed to be a second chance at redemption turned into a repeat of the same pattern. He was rebuilding dependency, turning love into control. The same words he once used on Tatiana were now aimed at Olga. "You don't understand how much I love you. I just want you near me. Without me, you're nothing." By this point, there was no difference between his past and his present. He wasn't seeking forgiveness. He didn't feel guilt. He didn't question his actions. Freedom to him wasn't about reform, it was a license to continue unchecked. And while the system labelled him rehabilitated, he was already laying the groundwork for another tragedy. By the fall of 2024, the relationship between Olga Lucia Peñuela and Diego had completely unraveled. Arguments were constant. Olga made the decision to end it. She told him she no longer wanted to live together and asked him to leave. At first he seemed calm, but within days, the threats began. He started sending her messages, accusing her of being unfaithful and demanding answers. Then came the fake social media accounts, used to insult her and warn that he was going to see her in person. Olga blocked his numbers, changed her social media settings, and avoided going out alone. But Diego didn't go away. He kept showing up, at her doorstep, ringing the bell, disappearing when someone opened the door. Olga's mother, Gloria Inés, saw the danger escalating fast. She told her daughter flat out, "He's going to kill you if you don't get out for good." But Olga didn't get the chance to take the steps she needed. On the morning of December 5th, 2024, Olga left home to run some errands. On her way back, Diego was waiting for her outside. Neighbors later said the two were arguing, at first in hushed voices, then louder. A young girl nearby heard Olga scream. Diego pulled out a knife and stabbed her several times. She collapsed right there on the sidewalk. He dropped the weapon and ran. It all happened in a matter of seconds. Witnesses called the police and emergency services. Olga was rushed to the hospital, but doctors couldn't save her. The stab wounds were fatal. Her daughter was nearby and saw everything unfold. According to witnesses, the girl screamed until neighbors carried her away from the scene. The city fell silent. That same day, news broke. A man previously convicted of killing a woman is suspected of another violent crime. Police launched a nationwide search. An arrest warrant was issued for Diego Maria Ramirez. Despite tight security at bus stations, borders, and terminals, he managed to disappear. Investigators quickly determined that the attack had been premeditated. In the days before the killing, Diego had bought a knife, watched Olga's home, and created fake online accounts. His actions showed careful preparation, not a spontaneous act. Gustavo Calderon, the father of Diego's first victim, learned about the murder from the evening news. When he heard the suspect's name, he immediately knew. History had repeated itself. In a short interview with a local radio station, he said, "I warned them." He wasn't going to stop. He should have been under supervision. Now, another family has lost their daughter. Public outrage exploded online. People demanded answers. How could a man once convicted of killing a woman live freely, without oversight? Forums filled with heated debates, not just about the crime itself, but about the failure of the justice system. Yet for Olga's family, none of that mattered anymore. Her body was released to relatives 2 days later. The funeral was small and private. No reporters, no cameras. Her daughter stood beside the casket, now without a mother. Meanwhile, Diego remained on the run. Police believed he had already fled the country. Another life was lost, and the same warnings from 9 years earlier came true. Everything had repeated itself. The same signs, the same mistakes, the same lack of accountability. Only this time, no one could claim they didn't know what he was capable of. The death of Olga Lucia Peñuela sent shockwaves across Colombia. It was the second victim of the same man. Someone who, despite his past crime, had walked free. News outlets questioned not just the murder, but how the justice system had allowed a convicted killer to leave prison early and vanish without supervision. Tatiana's father, Gustavo Calderon, found himself back where he started 9 years earlier. He began printing flyers again, this time with 2 faces, his daughter's and Olga's, both marked with the same name. Meanwhile, police issued an international alert. Based on intelligence, Murilo was believed to have crossed the border, possibly hiding in Brazil or Argentina, where he had acquaintances. Investigators suspected he was using a new name and forged documents. the public reaction was divided, between outrage and indifference. For some, it was just another domestic tragedy. For others, it became a symbol of a system's failure, a system that couldn't protect either woman.